Hello and welcome to On Second Street, where today we're going to be talking about some of the scariest government policies and issues out there. After all, we've got Halloween just right around the corner. So we're going to be talking about some of the most concerning policies and things that are happening in this country. And we're also going to talk about some treats. What would be some treats for the Canadian public in terms of policies and things governments could do to really improve the public's lives? Joining me to talk about this important topic is Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and Tristin Hopper from the National Post. Thank you both for taking a few minutes here to chat about this topic. Kris, we'll start off with you. When you think about what's happening in this country, we'll start, say, at the federal level. What are some of the most concerning things that you're seeing in terms of policies that are out there?
Well, to be really frank, it's hard to think of a policy that isn't scary that's coming from the federal government. It's just a dumpster fire in pretty much every angle that you look at. For the Taxpayers Federation, though, we typically take on the angle of fiscal responsibility, of which this federal government has none. Zero. So I would say the most prominent frightening thing about this current government's fiscal policy or lack thereof is the federal debt. So the federal debt has now been doubled by this Trudeau government. And it's easy to kind of let your brain gloss over that, but picture back all the different prime ministers and their governments throughout history, right? Like Harper and the first Trudeau and Diefenbaker and Mackenzie King. Like some of those people governed through, world wars and Great Depressions. Imagine all of their debts, double it. That is what this Trudeau government's done in 9 years. And it's almost impossible to imagine climbing out of that. To picture a trillion, if you started counting to a trillion right now, it would take you 30,000 years to count to 1 trillion. So yeah, that is really scary.
Certainly a long time to count that high. Tristin, does the national debt keep you up at night?
Um, well, it does for me, but I'm not a normal person. But I did think about this question a lot, and it's sort of a trope around Halloween is that politicians will say, like, the real scary thing is my opponent's policy. But I think we can all agree, these are very concerning. But there's no horror movie about mounting debts. It's usually in the opening scenes of like a zombie movie. You'll see just a discarded newspaper, like debt rises. But there actually are legitimately policies right now that I do think would fit within a legitimate horror movie. I can think of two. One would be
Hmm.
criminal sentencing. So, I mean, this is pretty much a daily occurrence in Canada of where someone will have a stalker, a dangerous, an ex-boyfriend, threatening to kill them. They're put in prison. They think it's fine. And then that individual is given bail, is given early release, and then they're back on the street, often to victimize their victim again. So yeah, I can think of quite a few horror movies. I mean, people are literally having nightmares because of this. The person who murdered their daughter, um, the person who raped them when they were going to a boarding school or whatever, is given just a shockingly token sentence. You'll look at the sentencing report. It mostly looks into the background of the offender, how it wasn't really their fault because they had a traumatic childhood, and then they're out again to offend once again. So yeah, I'd say that. And then number two, which again wouldn't be a bad horror movie, would be the extremes of Canadian made policy. So this is the stories we've heard where someone is in hospital with sort of a chronic condition, and rather than being offered care for their chronic condition, is pushed the chance to, maybe you should consider assisted suicide multiple times. And again, that is Canadian policy. If you look at the guiding document, unlike any other country in the world, doctors are told they have the responsibility to inform patients of their options that are made. And most countries actually make that illegal. That if countries that do have legal assisted suicide, they say you cannot bring it up. You'll go to jail if you offer it unsolicited. So yeah, you can imagine a horror movie in which you're in a hospital bed, you're weak, you have no hope, and doctors are telling you should die.
Bring it
Kris, 30
around to
seconds. Any
accountability.
quick thoughts?
Yeah. You can encompass all of this back to accountability. And if you have a problem with any of the things that I just mentioned or that Tristin just mentioned, this government has proven that if you go out and protest it, it'll freeze your bank account.
Mhm.
That's pretty darn scary.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
it's
the
incredible how
yeah,
often we still hear that coming up. I mean, Joe Rogan talks about it regularly on his podcast, the most listened to podcast on the planet, and he's regularly talking about how Canada has this reputation now where if you speak out against the government, then it might freeze your bank account.